First of all, welcome and thank you to decide to take your time out on 90 minutes odd on a Friday evening here for the Between the Lines session. My name is Advait Kurlekar. My colleague here is Eklavya Malhotra. We are from a consulting company called Apovan Management Consultants. And as always, there are new faces here, so quick introduction. We've been organizing this program called Between the Lines for some time now. This is, as you now know, it's a open for all and a free program that we organize each month. The format is that every month we identify a book that we believe is a good book to read, like today's book as well. And depending on the topic of the book, we invite people from the industry and I moderate a panel discussion on the topic. So the book sets the context and the discussion is on the topics emanating from the book. So as if any of you remember the poster for today, the book is a book called What the West Should Learn from India. But the discussion is going to be, of course, on that, but more importantly on resetting the entire diplomacy, governance, and things like that. So, first of all, let me thank our host today, Professor Venugopal and his colleague and IMCC for being the gracious venue host. So, big round of thanks for them. Would also take this opportunity to thank Rohan Builders and National HRD Network who have been supporting us for long to make this program possible. In between the book summary by Eklavya, which many of you know is a fantastic summary that he makes, and the panel discussion, we have what we call a fun quiz, just a couple of questions just to get some participation from this thing. And there are, what's it today, Cadbury? Small Cadburys as people who can answer it correctly. Ramesh, you will get one in any case. So without further ado, let me invite Eklavya. Incidentally, we've been doing this for many months now. Today's session is session number 115 now. So thank you. So many people have been asking, is this the venue that we have? This is the 22nd venue that we are organizing it. And as somebody said, thanks to our programs and people who attend regularly, thoda sa Pune darshan ho raha hai. But that caters to different parts of the city and therefore it becomes convenient or not so convenient for, this is a good venue, yeah. So Venu, you got your this thing, sir.
Someone said, why have you come so far? I said, I will go anywhere.
Thank you so much. So some of our panelists have also have traveled from far and people like Praful also. So thank you again and over to Eklavya.
Thank you all for coming out in large numbers. It's almost like as if there is something going on in the world today which compelled you to attend a session on resetting globalization. I wonder what it is that could have brought you all over here on a Friday. Trump, is it? Well, one would never know. This session is being recorded, so in case if Trump wants to deport somebody from India, this was that lady, I will not disclose her name. Aadhaar card will be made available later on. Sir, don't speak so soon. So the session today, as you all know, the theme that we've chosen is resetting globalization because, yeah, frankly, globalization as we know it has probably met an unnatural death. Long live globalization as we experienced it over the last few decades, because the world that we live in today is really not even a pale shadow of what globalized world was intended to look like. And fortunately, at around the same time when we were planning this, we got to know that the ex-German ambassador to India, Walter J. Lindner, has penned a book which is a cross between his memoirs and also a sort of a request or a plea for the Western Bloc to look at India in a new light. So yeah, that became quite serendipitous, and that's why we thought that we'll choose this book, What the West Should Learn from India by Walter Lindner, as the context setting for the panel discussion today. So this book, again, now, we read a lot about, there are enough and more people who have come down to India and they do the usual eat, pray, love kind of circuit, and then they write down their thoughts, and mostly it's a glorification of everything that we usually tend to look down upon from our own ivory towers. But this book is quite different from that, from the point of view that this is not Walter's first rodeo or his first trip to India. So Walter first came to India way back in the 70s as a backpacker. He was hitchhiking his way across India, and that's the time when he first saw what the diversity of India really stands for. And that's probably the time when he fell in love with the country, and he resolved that he'll come back to India in a short span of time. That short span of time ultimately proved to be 45 years to be precise, and he came back to India later on in 2019 as I think his 7th or 8th deputation as the German ambassador, and that is when he got his India posting after having served in a variety of countries, primarily in the African continent. So when he comes back to India, he makes this startling discovery that the India which I had left behind 45 years ago, it is unchanged. Now, for anybody reading that in today's day and age would find it quite astonishing that how could you even compare the India of 1970s and equate it and place it on a similar pedestal as the India of today. And then when you start reading the book, you understand what the sentiment behind that statement really implies. He says that when he first came to India, the thing which stood out for him was that despite all the hardship and challenges, people were always ready to say yes to him for any reasonable or not so reasonable request that he made of them. And he confesses that in 2019, he experienced the same kind of resourcefulness which he had experienced back in the day, that Indians simply do not know how to say no to somebody. Now that sets the context and sets the ball rolling, and I would also say it can set a cat among the pigeons depending on how you view it. So the book is, I would say, it's not an easy read per se. It's not a book which you can just pick up and gain insights, because the book challenges many of the traditional notions that we hold of our own country. And when we read somebody else speaking about certain things, at certain points, it does also prick a little bit. But in terms of what he says that the West can learn from India is basically, he writes about 2 or 3 main areas which we can focus on. The first is that he talks about that the West has yet to learn from India in terms of how somebody can get over their colonial hangovers. Now that's why I said the book is not an easy read, because if you ask, most of us would probably allude to our colonial hangover as still being enshrined within most of our behaviors and our culture also. But coming from a sort of a neutral observer on the sidelines, he says that it's remarkable how India has managed to shed away most of the baggage which was left behind post-independence, and has managed to carve out at least some kind of identity of its own. And he says that in all his travels across the world, it probably is the only country where he has seen that eagerness to have their own identity and to resolutely decline or shirk off any identities or baggage of the past. Now he compares this to the European nations, and he says that when I travel all across Europe, what he really sort of observes is that governments and people have a tendency to rest on their laurels, to talk about the great illustrious past that they had. And he says that in India, I have never heard people speak about what they had achieved earlier, because frankly, they are trying to dissociate themselves from that past. So he says that, as ironic as it sounds, and this is where he gets into basically India being a land of paradoxes. So he writes about the fact that India is working steadily in terms of basically making sure that whatever we see of India or whatever is displayed of India to the external world is as far away from what India of probably the 50s and 60s used to look like. And this is coming from somebody who probably had, if not a similar kind of a bird's eye view back in the 70s or when he was traveling through India, but definitely had more of an objective perspective than most of us can hope to have, for the simple reason that he has definitely traveled way more across the length and breadth of our country than we can confess to have done. So he comes from a position, if not of authority, but definitely from a position of experience. And that's something which he writes at length about, that the Western world has long regarded India as being a nation which is riddled with its own insecurities. And yet he says that in all his 3.5 years of serving over here in that diplomatic position, he says that those insecurities are not to be found when you are speaking or when you're interacting with people at the highest levels. He says instead, what comes across is a confident young India, which is very clear about where they wish to go and is equally, if not more clear, about the people that they have to take along on the way, because this is not going to be a solo journey. This is not a solo backpacking journey which the country can embark upon. There are way too many variables that have to be taken care of. And he writes that nowhere else in the world do leaders have to contend with the kind of multitudes that our leaders have to face on a daily basis. And he says that the fact that they do it with not too many things going south is probably a testimony to them, which we do not offer or which we do not sort of certify them with on a regular basis. So another thing which he writes in terms of what the West can learn from India is in terms of basically what he's calling the South Bloc. So he says that the West basically contributes about 20% of the global population, whereas 80% of the population resides in this global South, which has long been ignored or which has long only been, been seen as a bastion of some place to basically ward off their junk, or to look upon as a place with limited opinions, limited business opportunities, and definitely primitive kind of ideologies, so to speak. And then he gets into a thorough dissection of why India actually needs to reclaim and start tom-tomming its position and status as the world's largest functioning democracy, because he goes on to cite examples and instances from the United States and the European countries where democracy is not functioning, at least as they claim to be. So he says that for every person, and he does mention this at length, that most Western journalists and also the Western political leaders, if not the general public, they'd share a disparaging view of India. But he says that if I were to ask them that when did you last visit India, he says chances are that most of them would have neither visited or at best would have visited a couple of times in the last 30 or 40 years. So he says that the lack of travel and experience in India gets exposed as arrogance and condescension towards the country and towards what the country is trying to work towards. And he says that what is observed and what gets portrayed in the international media is only the things which anyway the Indian government and public at large is aware of. And that's when he gets into the most touchy area of the book, which is basically the growing religious intolerance and the increasing nationalism, or rather as he puts it, the increasing Hindu nationalism, which is coming to the forefront right now. And that's where he draws parallels with Germany's own checkered past. Because he says that while the West has a lot to learn from India, at the same time India also has to be careful not to go down the path which some of these European countries specifically have tread earlier, like Germany in particular. So when he talks about, or rather when he writes about what the West can imbibe from India, he says that very often the West has only sought out India as somebody who can sell spirituality, or rather New Age spirituality as he calls it, and then be content with being a low-cost producer or being just a low-cost substitute for us. He says that India has not yet shown the kind of benefits that they have accrued on account of the non-alignment with any particular bloc in this multi-polarized world. He said the fact that India has managed to retain somewhat of its own stance or remain neutral in most of the global conflicts, he says is the only reason why India, or rather why this century, if not an Asian century, it might just turn out to be the Indian century. He says a lot of credit will be given to the non-alignment of Indian policies. So one of the things which he mentions, or rather which he says that the world, or specifically the Western world, needs to learn from India, is how to build bridges rather than burn them at, like basically the onset of any disagreement. So he writes about the growing this sort of wave of right-wing nationalism or right of center political movements that are taking place across the globe. And he says that while India also has to contend with them, but to India's credit, he says that they are also mindful, they are also careful of ensuring that at least there is some semblance of what the Constitution stands for, what privileges are enshrined within the Constitution, and how citizens can avail that at least to a greater extent than what is being passed on in most of the other developed economies or developed countries. So one of the things which he does speak or which he does write at length about without divulging too many details is a very controversial visit of his behind closed doors with Mohan Bhagwat during his tenure over here. And he again leaves you sort of hanging in terms of what might have transpired behind closed doors. But he does say that he came back with the impression that the powers that be within the RSS are extremely clear about how they wish to achieve their objectives, and it is not as destructive as it is being made out to be. But he also says at the same time in a cautionary note that chances are that the message or the intent which the people at the top have, it does not seem to have permeated across the ranks. So the file and rank probably have not understood what exactly is the intent behind some of the public statements that have been made. And this itself was something which he says it created a furor back in Germany also when he decided to go and meet him. He said this was unheard of, that no other ambassador or nobody else in that position from any other country had ever dared to actually step out of the so-called Chanakyapuri area and actually go out to understand that whatever is being written about, what is being spoken about within the media, how much of that is actually true and how much of that is pure sensationalism. So what he writes about is that while the West has a lot to learn from India, at the same time he also says that India has to be cautious because the message is not being clearly spread out the way it is meant to be. And that's why he talks about this entire thing of the rise of nationalism within India, which could probably be one of the impediments in the Indian growth story. But at the same time, he also says that during his entire time in India, what he has seen over here, and he writes about it at length, that he has seen this need or this sort of fervent desire within the young Indians of wanting to bounce back. He writes about having met so many people during his time over here who have suffered setbacks, who have suffered financial setbacks, who have been through some of the most horrible things that have happened in our country's recent history. And he says that the one thing which I came out with after every single interaction was that people over here simply refuse to give up. He said people have become so resilient over here that they don't even consider themselves to be resilient. They just think of it as a way of life and they call it a survival hack. He said, but they don't understand that this same virtue or this same quality, had it been exhibited in any of the Western nations, they would not have seen the steady decline from that sort of, a great high which they used to enjoy so many years ago. He says that resilience is the one quality which if he could take back to Germany, then that would be it, because he fears that most people within the developed world or within the Western bloc have become so shy of taking upon anything risky that they have decided to basically let go of anything which is an independent point of view and just side with whatever is the mass public opinion. And he says that in India, it's very difficult to quantify what a mass public opinion is simply by virtue of our population. He says just because you hear 1,000 people shouting on the streets about something does not still make it a mass public opinion. There are simply so many people and so many Indians living within the communities and having different beliefs, different ideals, even different ideologies that you really cannot say that this is what India stands for. And he says this is the reason why perhaps India's non-alignment or India's refusal to polarize with any one particular state or with any one particular foreign entity has been possible because Indians themselves do not know what the mass public opinion perhaps is. Now that is something which, again, that's one of the reasons why I said that at times the book is also a little difficult to digest, because it also lays bare some of those things which we probably regard as inadequacies within our own system. But then it's also a pleasant surprise to note that somebody else on the other side of the fence regards those very same areas or those same lacunae as, possible green shoots which can materialize into something much more significant and beneficial later on. So the book also chronicles his various sort of interactions with people across different walks of life. So he was also very renowned and famous for hosting these informal evening discussions with various other diplomats and think tanks, which used to be called, I think, UTBT, under the banyan tree, where he would basically compare the sessions with a guitar in hand and sing songs. So yeah, as far as hippie diplomats go, Walter Lindner certainly fits the bill. And one of the most endearing things which comes out in the book is his deep, passionate, unrequited love for the Indian ambassador. So the ambassador car, which he was famously photographed with multiple times, which he calls Auntie Ambi. So yeah, he did pick up some of our quirks over here. And this famous red ambassador, which he says he found stored away somewhere in the embassy complex while he, like during his early days over here. And he got it restored, and then against all protocols and whatever security clearances that he was supposed to be showered with, he decided that this is going to be his only official mode of transport. And this was sanctioned just a few hours before he was supposed to go to the Rashtrapati Bhavan to present his credentials as the ambassador and get it sort of ratified. And then he famously held a press conference right outside India Gate while leaning against his red ambassador. And that, he says, was the greatest love and loss of his life, that he could not take the ambassador back home with him to Germany. So it's a book which, again, perhaps in today's context, it makes for an insightful read. But I think, like we always say, it's more important for us to focus on the theme rather than the book itself, because the book is only here to basically give us somebody's opinion in terms of how they perceive the world at large. But yeah, we are fortunate that we have people in our midst today who will be on the panel who have a much more definitive point of view in terms of where India is heading in this entire sort of globalization 2.0, if we can call it that. And that's going to be the focus of today's session also. So we'll move on to the main feature of today's session, the panel discussion. And as Advait had promised, we've got a few Cadburys available with us here today. We have 10, but now I can see there are only 9 because Ramesh has got one bookmarked for himself. So we'll have the fun quiz, and Advait had insisted that it has to be focused around the theme. So this is my best shot. Now the first question, mind you, it's 5:50 p.m., so things can change before we end the day. What is the current tariff which has been levied by US on China imports?
125.
You guys are really not keeping up with things. It's 145, Supriya gets it right. 130. Has Trump tweeted something while we were up here?
No, it's 145.
And how much did China retaliate with? 125, right? Okay, so no prizes for that because everybody seems to know that. Okay, then again, in the globalization context, there is a term which is being thrown around very often nowadays. It's called decoupling. Who does that refer to? Yes, US-China relations being severed or being completely cut off, all supply chains being broken. So that's what decoupling, or I think even conscious uncoupling would also be relevant for that. Yeah, this one was interesting. So learned a bit of geography over the last week. Why was Heard and McDonald's Island in the news? Yeah, Sachin. Yes, penguin. So basically a penguin inhabited island which has been levied 10% tariff by Trump. Now, of course, you have to excuse him because in all fairness, he thought this is where McDonald's headquarters are. heard in McDonald's, so he heard about McDonald's. And that was a pity attempt at a joke. Okay. Now, something which has happened, I think, yesterday only. Which group has acquired Versace? Prada, okay. Sachin clearly seems to be an investor on the go. So in a $1.4 billion landmark deal, and this apparently just got closed before the tariffs were supposed to hit, and then the news was made public. Yeah, this is closer to home. So a couple of weeks ago, there was this news item that among all this talk about GCCs setting up in India and Pune basically emerging as one of the hubs, there's a company which has taken up some 7.5 lakh square feet of retail space for 1,000 crores over the next 10 years. Ramesh, please take your chocolate. It's not Microsoft, you don't get a chocolate. Citicorp, Supriya gets it right, and Ramesh is saved of unnecessary blood sugar spikes. So Citicorp has struck a deal with Panchsheel to acquire, I think, about 10 stories in one of their projects somewhere in Kharadi or Kalyan Nagar. Kalyan Nagar, is it? Okay, so that's going to be Panchsheel Business Spaces. Great. Okay, another thing, in the context of all the news that we've been hearing recently, Janet Yellen, the Fed chair previously, before Jeremy Powell came in, she came up with this term called friendshoring. What's the meaning of friendshoring?
Putting up in a friendly country, an ally country.
Correct. So ally shoring, so basically setting up operations in an ally which is more aligned to your business interests. And again, this was also a couple of days ago news. Who did Indigo overtake to become the world's most valued airline? Delta, finally. The chocolate finds its rightful owner. So with a $23.4 billion market cap, Indigo, I think momentarily, I'm sure Delta must have bounced back after the spike yesterday. And then today again, I think we must have overtaken them. Again, since we're talking about globalization, and there has been so much talk about India not producing a global consumer brand, which Indian brand has partnered with Michigan Milk Producers Association to sell fresh milk in US? Yes, it is Amul. So Amul has partnered with the Michigan Milk Association, and they'll be selling milk in the US. It becomes the...
Milk chocolates, somebody from this side needs some.
Yeah, and this again, I think most of us would know this perhaps. So what's the name of India's premier conference which took place last month on geopolitics and geoeconomics? The Raisina Dialogues, yes. I'm sure we'll get to know a little more about that from Sahil, who is a fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, which hosts the Raisina Dialogue every year. Final question, this is for everyone. Who pays for tariffs? And with that, Vishwas, you know more than Donald Trump. So if that counts for something, that doesn't count for much, I know. But,
Be appointed as advisor.
but yeah, you can go back home satisfied in the knowledge that you probably know way more than him, and you can also decipher the formula which he showed on the Rose Garden lawns of how the tariffs have been calculated. So that's it from my side. Thank you all so much. Over to Advait. Yes, Ramesh.
Make an observation.
Yes.
If they were having a quiz like this anywhere in the US today, chances are that majority of the audience would not know the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the next book, What the West Should and Could and Must Learn from India. Thank you all so much.
That brings me to formally introducing our panelists here. I'll start with Sahil Deo here. He heads. Sahil, please give me a round of applause, please. So he heads CPC Analytics, a policy consulting company, international company based in Pune and Berlin. He's a master's in public policy and a doctorate in governance. I never knew till I read your profile that you can do a doctorate in governance. And obviously as a policy consulting company, he's been working with a large number of multinationals as well as government agencies. He's also on the executive committee of MCCIA, which is the Maratha Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. So thank you for coming here. For people who may be aware, and some of you I know have participated, he is the driving force behind PPPF, which is Pune Public Policy Festival, along with his close friend Siddharth, who's also there. Dinanath is here, and a couple of others. So thank you, Sahil. When I approached him, he said, "Look, I'm a behind-the-scenes guy. I've never been on stage." I said, "When was the last time you did something for the first time?" So thanks again for coming there. Joining him is Supriya Rao. She is the managing director of Clear Route. She's a techie all through. She told me, don't say how many years of experience, so many years of experience in various techie companies, Expansion, Infosys, and things like that. And currently the country head for a UK-based company, which is, thanks Supriya for coming here. Last but not least, Megha Jashnani. When I put up her profile on LinkedIn, one of somebody I know, he said, what's NASDAQ doing in Pune? So that's one of the questions I'm going to ask her in any case. So she is currently Senior Director, Talent and Strategic Human Resources in NASDAQ in Pune. And she's also, has tremendous multinational, if I may say, 2 decades of multinational experience, mainly in the US and now in Pune. So thank you for coming here. Okay, so I think we have 2 mics, so we can share those 2 mics. Here is the, okay. So can I start with you with the same question?
Yeah.
What's NASDAQ doing in Pune? And what's NASDAQ today?
Okay, so I'll start with what's NASDAQ doing in Pune. So NASDAQ acquired a company called Adenza, and so we have 3 offices in India. Actually, NASDAQ already has 1 office in India, which is Bangalore, and then they acquired a company called Adenza, which is 2 fintech products, and we have offices in Chennai, Mumbai, and Pune. So that's how Pune.
Okay.
And what NASDAQ does, NASDAQ, I'm sure everyone knows, is a stock market. It's an index, but it's not just that. NASDAQ is pivoting in a big way in the last couple of years to being a platform organization. So of course we run the stock exchange. We have our own stock exchange. We run direct stock exchanges, at least 7 stock exchanges. And then we have an additional 123 stock exchanges that run on our products.
Okay.
But outside of that, we have trading products, we have financial crime products, we have data analytics and indexes and indices products. And there's a lot more. So the entire pivot is to become a platform organization versus just being a single siloed stock exchange.
And how large are you here in India in terms of?
So India, we are about 2,000 employees now and growing. And again, a lot of it came from the acquisition that I was a part of. We were about 1,500 and NASDAQ had about 500 in India. And then now that's, I think, in the next year or 2, so globalization and everything that we're talking about and the brain drain and all of that, I think the India operations are definitely going to grow by 30%.
Okay. I'll come back to you with questions, but maybe let's do a quick intro round beyond what I've told you about you, Supriya. What is Clearroute and what exactly is the business here in Pune?
Yeah, so see, Clearroute, we are a tech consultancy engineering firm. So what we essentially do is we partner with some of the large enterprises across the globe, and we undertake large-scale DevSecOps transformation programs for them. So basically, anything to do with your software products, taking it to production, making it live, introducing your CI/CD pipelines, quality of the softwares and the hardwares is what we essentially do. And we have been very successful in terms of hiring talent, in terms of the kind of culture that we provide at Clearroute here. I think I can proudly say we are the only services company which does an equal profit sharing amongst all of its employees.
Wow. Okay.
Right, so that's one of our unique value selling proposition and our core DNA in terms of not just acquiring but also retaining and nurturing talent. So in a nutshell, as I mentioned, we are a tech consultancy firm and we undertake large scale DevSecOps transformation engagements and programs and completely do tech with cloud and test automation and DevSecOps.
So, no, maybe that's another mic. You can hear? Or we have to hold the mic close? Okay. You can check with them. They can increase the volume.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my name is Sahil. I work in public policy research. I set up a firm on a CPC analytics 11 years back. So we are a small firm, 22 people. 10 of us are based in Berlin. So my co-founders are German, so there's some I stayed in Berlin for 5 years in other parts of Europe and Africa before moving back to India in 2017. And I, as Eklavya mentioned, I'm a non-resident fellow at ORF. ORF is a think tank that primarily works in geopolitics, but in allied geos.
So I will start with you on the questions part. Given the topic of the book, in your view, when Westerners think of India, I have coined an acronym called SHYAM, S-H-Y-A-M, spirituality, herbal, yoga, Ayurveda, and meditation. Beyond this, what do you think India should learn, West should learn from India?
So, firstly, thanks for inviting me. Secondly, I'm no geopolitics expert. I understand nothing of geopolitics. Thirdly, it's a very difficult topic. Right? Like so, Ambassador Littner wrote this book. I haven't read it, but I saw his interview on BTL or something. So my background, I'm an engineer, right? Then I did a PhD in public policy. I work more on the econometrics data side, right? So whenever I come across documents such as this book, which are full of anecdotal references, I really don't know how to react. Okay. It's anecdotes. It's one probably very important person who had a great experience in his career, achieved a lot. But it's finally anecdotes, right? It's anecdotes that he encountered in whatever time. And he is extrapolating these anecdotes. Right? So that's the disclaimer that I would want to start with. With regards to what the West should learn, so I think all of us have probably spent some time in the West and in India. Right? I think it's not one monolith, right? Neither is the West one monolith, neither is Europe, as we spoke, one monolith, neither is India one monolith, right? So, I'm sorry, I'm just giving you disclaimers rather than answering. Other than this, so like what this DPI story in India is fascinating, right? What we have managed to do with digital identity and then a bunch of things that sit on top of the fact that we have cracked this digital identity, right? So in Germany, for example, even today, I cannot open a bank account online. Right? I have to go to the physical bank to verify myself. The exceptions, there's a bank called as N24, small some startups which are different, but majorly I need to go to the bank. Right? So now this is only enabled because we have this digital identity here. And India stack, like Sharat Sharma and iSpirit gang based in Bangalore, they think that this is an idea that India can export to the West, right? And they have, I think, Srinivas or something, they set up an entity in the Bay Area recently where they are actually trying to export this to parts of the West as well as Africa, right? So this is definitely one thing where I think the West can learn from it.
Okay. So Priya, any views on that?
I think I completely agree with him in terms of the DPI, like digital public infrastructure. In fact, because I've also lived in the West, and since I work in the services industry, I have a lot of my customers come and visit me. So when they see me paying through the UPI or having an Aadhaar or a DigiLocker, they are like quite fascinated because India is quite ahead in the curve when it comes to digital public infrastructure. And I think as India, I see a lot of us, as in the government, also creating these blueprints for the others also to adapt and acknowledge and adopt, basically. And I think one thing, as per my view, the West should learn from India is, I think, and I've went through some of the YouTube videos of Mr. Walter India, is the word jugaad, right? So I think Indians are very good at jugaad and creating something out of very limited availability of resources that are available with them. So anything that you can create and solve a real world problem, I think the West will definitely learn from us.
I'll just pick on what she said. Is you've stayed in the West, you've stayed in the US, you work for US companies. Jugaad looked as a positive thing or as a pejorative?
So again, I don't think jugaad is a word that everyone understands. But I think even in the US, I think a large part of the working workforce, especially in the tech side, is Indians. And I think the resourcefulness that Indians have genetically, I think it just comes naturally to kind of find the best even in a worse situation and solve for it. I think that's something they really appreciate. And it's the flexibility, the adaptability, our willingness to change is something that is appreciated. But because when you work with the Westerners, they're very rigid in their thinking, in the way they approach things. It has to check all the boxes, which is not something, as an Indian, you would find your way through just like we ride the bikes on the street.
And the cars.
So I think that's what differentiates, being an Indian working in the West. And that's how you will see a lot of the senior folks in some of the large corporations are being run by people who've moved or migrated over years, or even just be like born, brought up in the US, for example. So
Sure. So, staying with you, question to both of you actually, who work for multinational companies. Last 10 days, what has been the buzz in your companies from a formal perspective? And I don't know whether you are allowed and whether you can. What's the informal view?
I think the informal and both the formal views. I think the informal view is just to wait and watch. In fact, we as leaders are also talking to a lot of our customers. And to be honest, I can share this. So there has been a pause on certain investments, delays in getting approvals on certain projects. Right? Because yesterday I was talking to one of the insurance firms in UK, and we were almost on the verge of signing a deal. It was almost on the verbal negotiation, and it was just a matter of signing the SOW statement of work. And we were told by them that we'll hit a pause button on this, see how the entire globalization, the Trump tariff, the trade tariff spans out, and then we resume in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months. So this is definitely a big, major impact of what.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is definitely a major impact that we see, and also in terms of the existing customers also asking for rate corrections, the sell rates, the bill rates, in terms of providing more discounts, margins, flexibility is also what we've started hearing in the last couple of days. So there's definitely been an impact, at least to the customers that we are talking to. But yeah, these two, as in hitting a pause on some large scale transformation engagements, as well as for the existing engagements also asking for marginal and discounts. And
Wow. Okay. So, Megha, is this working? Yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't know whether it's real or not, but WhatsApp University, you get these messages. So I just read I got a message saying that a signboard in a Chinese outlet somewhere that if you are a US citizen, you will be charged 125% tax. And if you have any complaints, please contact the local US consulate. So you said that NASDAQ is all about platforms and you have 120 odd other customers in different cities. Like what Supriya mentioned, have you already started facing the heat or what's it about?
So I think so NASDAQ, of course, we run our stock exchange when the whole tariff news came last Friday. The trades, of course, we saw what happened in the market. It fluctuated and dropping like crazy and then stabilizing now. But for us, from a technology standpoint, I think it tested what capacity we can do. And fortunately, NASDAQ is like a leader in terms of technology. NASDAQ was the first stock exchange to move the exchange to the cloud. And I would say almost all, barring a few countries because of regulations where we can't move to the cloud, all our exchanges run on cloud. So, and when it's on cloud, and when a dip like this came, the number of transactions increased multifold. I think it increased like 500% or something like that on a Friday last week. And of course, and there were circuit breakers hitting in, and then you need to be on top of all of these things. Our technology team and the support team, I think they worked through that weekend to prepare the technology infrastructure to be ready, to be available for anything that goes down. I think there was one country where the stock exchange went down. There was a lag in the reflection. So I think all of that for us, I think what happened in the last week has been big impact, not small. But again,
but no cancellations so far.
no, nothing. And what we came up, because I think COVID was the last time that we saw a big major increase and dips and increases. I think learning from that, we always kind of prepare ourselves for what the next big thing could be. And I think those lessons learned then helped us now. And then I think we had the head of engineering and R&D in Mumbai the same day, on Monday this week, and she traveled over the weekend, of course. And then she was working through, and I met her as well. And I think they were all very calm, and we had a global town hall where our CEO came online and told us what was happening with what these rates mean, how does it impact us, and how actually it doesn't. Life is as usual. The markets go up and down, but from our point of view, our technology is supportive. Nothing broke. Clients are happy. People would make their trades, and it's all good.
Okay, great. Sahil, now, like Supriya mentioned, I was speaking to one of my clients in the US, and like she said, we were discussing something, and we were hoping to start something. And he said, look, frankly, Advait, we are waiting for this executive order business to sort of die down. Now, what we've gone through in the last 10 days, how does it affect, one, like you said, policy making, but two, from a diplomacy perspective, what's your take on it?
Okay, so firstly, we did make fun of Trump. I personally think politicians are the smartest people out there. So the kind of resilience that he's shown, being outside office for 4 years, being targeted, is fascinating for me as a policy. The second thing is we need to understand that he caters to an audience. Right? There is a core set of voters that have been impacted in the US. So typically, if you look at the white Americans, if you look at, I was there a few months back in the protest. If you look at data, they are definitely not as educated as before, and neither are they as well off as before. Right? So the whole land of opportunities, education as a growth driver, whatever, all of that story for white Americans, for whatever reason it is, I'm not expert on the reasons, but that's real, right? That they are folded off, but the feeling of entitlement is still there. Right? So Trump does cater to this core voter group of his. So, based on my conversations, I understand that the money that he would get from these tariffs would essentially lead to certain tax cuts domestically, right? Which he wants to pass on this as well. So I spoke to a senior bureaucrat in India. So for India, right, based on what I understand, not a lot changes. Right?
Okay.
From a diplomacy perspective, their understanding is that the US has always been difficult to deal with, right? And that continues, right? It's just that the tonality, the way Trump says certain things were not accepted in the past, in the field of diplomacy or global politics. But the way the US goes about projecting its interests is not different. Right? So I don't think, personally, I don't think, and I tell myself that a lot, we should not be too obsessed with Trump as a person because he has the ability to make it all about him. But a lot of what he is doing is furthering, as he sees it, the interests of the US, which he is meant to do. Right? So I don't think it's as wrong as it's made to be. And for India, like again, I'm sorry, I don't work in the private sector, like though I run a private firm. I look at this differently, probably. I don't. It's actually good for India. I think what's happening in a couple of years will definitely be good.
Sticking with you, we talk of this twin track diplomacy, and while this was even before it was announced earlier, we were saying that we are having trade talks with the US counterparts, etc., etc. So how does these two things work in parallel?
So it's all happening, right? It's not that as in Tesla has been trying to enter India for years. We have been blocking them or whatever with a lot of conditions saying that we do this. Starlink was the same.
Yeah.
These are things that we know publicly. Harley Davidson had talks again for years, right? So I really don't think this is new, right? Suddenly he has the ability to pull all the media. I don't think all of us tracked the Ukraine-Russia war as closely till this Zelensky thing happened in the White House, right? So since it's now suddenly in the media, we all now speak about Zelensky. And, we have been buying oil happily from Russia all along. So we have turned out to be a winner in this story that we have maintained our relations with Russia as well as the US. Right? So I think we've done.
But is that something that the West can learn from India? That is this non-aligned NAM 2.0 in a different way?
Yes, I think we are not. Unfortunately, I would love to believe it otherwise, but we are not as significant globally as we make it sound. Right? We are not. So I stayed in Germany for 5 years. There were 2 news items about India in 5 years in the newspaper. Right? So I think that's where we stand.
Okay. How is this affecting your company's policies and in terms of, like you said, your customers are already saying that, but that's last 10 days. But whatever is happening in the last couple of months, has it affected business? Has it affected sentiment?
Yeah, I think in the last couple of months it hasn't really affected anything. So we were doing business, in fact we were growing, we were thriving in our sales or new projects or accounts, be it the US, Europe, UK, or the APAC regions as well. But I think in the last 10 days since Trump has made the tariff announcements, right, that is where we are seeing a lot of shift happening. And it's too early to say, we are also testing waters as of now. But these early conversations have really created a spark, and that has turned a lot of thinking within our leadership as well as in where it's heading on. Our people really decide the deals as of now, at least in the private sector. And not just us, as in we are also talking and hearing about the same from our competition in the same mid-market segment as well today. That a lot of our deals that were on the verge of signing, they have not really said no, but they've hit a pause button saying that we'll delay it or we'll play it by the ear, see what happens and how this pans out for the rest of the world and for us as well. And then we'll take some calls as to how and when we get this started in the signing.
Sure. Megha from NASDAQ. Yeah, nice working. You mentioned about 3 places in India where the technology backend is. Is there any other globally? 4?
4 in India.
4 in India. Anything anywhere else other than India? And
We have offices in 70 countries.
okay.
We have close to 125 offices globally.
Wow. Okay. So it is not USA plus 1 for you then.
No,
It's
no.
USA plus 70. Okay. So how does this affect? Because you are in countries which perhaps are at war at each other and things like that. How do you manage this?
So when I go back to the Russia-Ukraine examples, we had offices in both countries. We had, of course, we had clients, like big clients in Russia. We had close to 350 employees in Ukraine. We still have them. And the Russia, of course, we had to start operations, we had to give up clients, we had to let go of employees, and we had to identify employees, we had to move them to other countries. So the whole geopolitical taking it to a higher level, of course, it impacts us because we are such a global organization with large impact on anything that changes does affect us in some way, form, or shape. So, be it the Israel-Hamas war that happened, Russia-Ukraine, anything that kind of destabilizes a region in any continent, I think has a direct impact on at least either our employees or our clients, one of the two. So, but again, we managed to mitigate it, and the whole Russia-Ukraine, honestly, 3 years in, we're still mitigating it.
Okay.
It's not done. We moved people from one country to another, and then came in NASDAQ, and that you cannot have operations in Russia and associated countries, so we're moving people to a third country right now. And Ukraine is, of course, at the men cannot leave the country, only the women can leave the country, so we're moving the women to Poland, and the men are still stuck at home. People are working from their basements because there's shelling that still happens today, especially where our office is. It's Kharkiv, it's very close to the border. So it is, I think, a huge impact on a company like NASDAQ and the scale that we are at and the operations that we run. I think
So this is a classic example of where geopolitics affects your company's policies and working.
Yes.
And you said people are working from basement, but in spite of the war, communication lines are on.
It's on.
Or is it the settling,
So
which must claims?
I think the first 5 months they were not working. Of course, we took care of them, we paid them, we did everything. But then post that they moved further into the interiors, but there are some people who are still living in the main Kharkiv city because of whatever they need to be there. But then in the more remote areas, I think the network lines and all that is okay, but then Kharkiv is where it's not stable. So I think from a management point of view, we take their productivity at 50%.
Okay.
So we know that if we are giving some work to Ukraine, the capacity, even though we have 300 people, we assume it's 150 people working there.
So there's much more humanitarian approach towards.
You have to, I mean,
yeah.
it's people up there. Yeah.
So Sahil, coming back to you, whatever is happening in this world, since you are into policy advisory, what would be your common advice that you would, I know it's going to be free advice, but there's no government kind of here. But what should governments do from a diplomatic perspective, from a policy perspective? Is it still wait or watch, or should India occasionally has done this aggressive kind of thing, the famous EAM's statement in Europe, which became viral. So what should countries like India do?
Again, so as in some data points, the number of diplomats that we have is lesser than Singapore. Right? So that's the number of IFS officers that India has. The numbers are growing, right? They are recruiting more IFS officers beyond their classes. So we need to think of that. In terms of, so generally I think India is doing great. Right? I say that with rationality, right? I think whether you would want to call it non-alignment, I don't know, right? Because
multi-alignment, actually.
Because there's no clarity on who is actually aligned with whom. Right? How is called non-alignment. But we again, I say this in confidence. What I was told is. Even the Russian side, apparently, it was extremely pro-China. Right? Like the Russian foreign minister did not want to maintain relations with India, and vice versa. Right? So it's actually our prime minister who went against the advice of his own team members and continued to maintain relations with Putin. So it actually happened, I'm told, at that time. And both the teams didn't want it to happen. Right?
Okay.
But such things come from the wisdom of leaders, and I think that's worked out. That's worked out great for us retrospectively. Yeah. I think political stability within the country is great for external diplomacy and geopolitics, right? So, with purely a mandate of 240. There could have been limited things that we could have done. Post that, BJP seems to have won most of the elections, and this 240 number might go. So all of that contributes to stable geopolitical takes on other countries, right? And within UPA and NDA, other than this second term of the UPA, there has been great consistency in terms of our foreign policy, which is also great. Right? So, I think generally we are stable. We just need to work on more fundamental things, right? Like more diplomats, right? Lateral entries in diplomacy, maybe. Having, like, say for example, our universities don't have So I just yesterday I was speaking to a professor. We just have 2 Africa departments in Indian public universities, right? So a lot of these regions are understudied. So how do you expect people to engage with them constructively if we don't know enough about those regions, right? So and that also is a reflection on our private sector, I must say, where they underinvest in these things, right? And like all of you might know that more, but typically trainings, a lot of things, these things are just discounted. Not enough resources are allocated to that because the academia then complains as to if we were to offer a Africa program for firms who export to Africa, right? None of them sign up for these programs. So if more of that happens and these departments are then strengthened, all of that would lead to a better geopolitical understanding of it.
Interesting point because we did some work in Africa, consulting company in Nigeria to be precise, and Airtel is very big as a Indian company in Nigeria. And from what we know, all the Indians who were posted there looked upon it as a punishment posting rather than something to learn from a new market. 2 things about what you said about the lateral posting. Is it being taken kindly by the people who matter? Because I have a couple of friends who went on a lateral posting, whatever it was, 3 years kind of thing, and had obviously came back not so happy in terms of what that is. The other thing is, while you mentioned political stability, part of it, but India was good with Trump 1, India was good with Biden, and India seems to be hopefully good with Trump 2. So does it really matter in terms of which party is in which country? We seem to be bye-bye with every president.
About the first part about lateral entries, there was a pushback, right? So I think Minister Paswan's party did not want that or whatever. They put out ads for joint secretary positions in the domestic ministries, right? This was not a foreign policy. But they pulled them back, right? So that relates to this whole 240, the fact that BJP doesn't have no sense. The earlier experience of lateral entries has also, some of the friends, it's been difficult, right? It's a classic insider-outsider thing doing these IAS things. But if done again and again, things will change, right? If done only once, then definitely nothing will change. The US, countries like Israel, right, they have a great lateral entry system in the diplomatic officers of this, and I think that helps greatly. I always wonder for the US. At some point, they had a Indian American, the American of Indian origin as an ambassador to India. Right? So I think it would fundamentally change the game if this person speaks an Indian language fluently alongside English and other languages. Right? So I think it's great if such things happen. About your second question about what I'm told is I think as in personal relationships between leaders matter. I think, right? I've never met any of these leaders, so I don't know. But I think what I read and I'm told, personal relationships matter. I don't know if you've seen this photograph of, so Putin and Merkel, so Putin speaks perfect German, Merkel speaks perfect Russian. So they used to speak to each other in one language. There's a famous photograph of a conversation between both of them where a big dog, so Merkel hates dogs, so big dog purposefully walks into the room, right, and comes close to Merkel and then walks off for no reason. During COVID, you must have seen Putin when he met Western leaders, sat on this long white table, and the Western leaders sat at that end of the table, and Putin sat there. Okay? And a lot of the other friendlier leaders sat next to him. Right? So I think while all of this might seem trivial, in the world of politics or geopolitics, these are important signals, and people matter. So I think Biden and our Prime Minister might have had a different relation and Trump, but I don't know.
Okay. Coming to the private sector now, like he says, how does this regime change here, there matter to you, especially when you're working in different countries as a multinational company?
I don't think it has a big change because business is business. I think it's a lot of it is BAU for us at this time. These are 5 terms, they will come, they go, but businesses continue to be. So, and I think that's the approach our CEO takes, and I think that's appreciated by the entire organization. So, I wouldn't say too much about the fact that we've changed the ways of our working.
I think the only change and hit that I can see is in terms of internal talent mobility. Because if we have any visas that need to be initiated, right, be it the H1Bs or the L1As or the L1Bs, for mobilizing talent from India to the US, there we have seen a lot of shift happening. A lot of rejections happening on B1, L1, H1B as well since the Trump administration. In Biden, it was still easier to get the visas through. But that is one, distinct shift that we see happening after the Trump administration taking over. So we are seeing a lot of US visa rejections.
So, are you getting any advisory from HO on any of this?
In fact, we have been advisory in terms of only
your UK headquarters.
UK headquartered, but we have one of our centers in US as well, where there's a lot of cross-cultural immersion programs that happen that we send or depute employees from India to the US. So advisory in the sense only if it's extremely crucial, if they are needed there, and what skill sets. If they are not able to find the skill set in the US back home, so they will be seconding or deputing an employee here from India. But advisory in terms of how do you apply for a visa, what's the kind of paperwork that's needed, and how do you make it watertight in terms of getting lower rejections or getting positive cases or visa success rates. I think those advisories we are still seeking, but this is one area where otherwise, as Meghna mentioned, it's all business as usual for us as well, but visas is definitely a concern.
Sure. Meghna, you said BAU, but since you are oversee HR and talent, how does it affect from an HR perspective in the business? Business-wise, it's business as usual. But at a people level, at a software issues level, what are the changes you've seen?
I think visas, of course, is one big. Again, from our point of view, we don't necessarily send too many people to the US. Primarily, we have clients. Our India center is like a central implementation center. So we do send people to all over the world, and I don't think there's an impact in any other country as such outside the US. So we have local people in US, so it's not necessarily impacting the business itself, the delivery of the business. But just again, from a talent attraction and hiring point of view, I think that the sentiment in the job market is a lot filled with fear. Nobody wants to move at this time. Everyone wants to play it safe. So kind of getting some super skilled talent, the niche talent that you need, I think that the hiring becomes slightly difficult. And then again, our employees want growth internally, so they want larger roles, but nobody wants to do that role. So I think that is an issue which is kind of being pent up since COVID. And again, COVID, we saw big increase in hiring in India and a lot of offshoring that happened here. But again, right now, from a senior roles point of view, from a critical niche skills point of view, I think it's getting more and more difficult to hire and then even retain.
Okay.
So and that's where the talent problem arises.
So on that point, the question I wanted to ask is,
Yeah.
Maybe pre-COVID, maybe 5-6 years ago, people would be waiting. If I'm working in a company like yours, I would be waiting for an opportunity to be sort of seconded to US for a couple of months or kind of thing. Is that still on?
No, I think the whole. Can you hear me? I think the whole attraction to go long term to US in particular is dying. I don't know how many of you have family or kids, friends of kids studying in the US. I think those kids are struggling. I get calls, messages every week saying, so months someone is looking for a job, they're the brightest student, they're the best student, and these kids are struggling. They have 6 months after they finish their education to look for a job, and then if they don't look for it, if they don't get a job in 6 months, they're scared to come back to India to visit family because they can't enter the country again. So they're just staying there, or they're taking up another certification or a course to keep their visa active. So I think those kids are already stuck, and then I think from the trend that I'm seeing now, parents are actually telling their kids not to go. So I think that's the big shift that's happening, and maybe it's good for India. I think we get to keep the smart talent we have, and we get to grow. And this impact is also, I think, just from a roles point of view that we see coming to India are not your low cost, day-to-day operational IT office or HR.
This is working suddenly now. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think that the roles that we are seeing that are coming to India are also more strategic, more higher in terms of the value that we expect to deliver. Global roles are being done out of India. So and I think that's the shift. India is not anymore just cost arbitrage. It is talent arbitrage that they're looking at.
Sure.
I'll pause here. If anybody from the audience has any question for any of the panelists? Yeah?
You are loud and clear, so
Thanks. You see, you mentioned that the administrations on the Russia and India side are not very keen on a close relationship. But Putin and Modi have established something. I want to ask a few questions from that. You see, Modi had gone to the BRICS summit in Kazan and he came back halfway. He had invited Putin before he came back. Suddenly we hear out of the blue in the end of March that Putin is coming to India in May. He has accepted Modi's invitation of, was it September, the Kazan summit. There was no fresh invitation that went out to Putin from India, no diplomat travel, nothing happened. Suddenly, one day out of the blue, Putin just says, yeah, I have accepted that Kazan.
So what's the question?
Yeah, I have accepted that Kazan invitation and I am coming to India in May. Couldn't understand this. Please could you throw some light on this?
So your comment and question is please explain.
Yeah.
Please explain.
But I have to explain the situation. Sorry?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, Ramesh.
I have a question to Sahil on the foreign policy for India. You mentioned generally India is doing pretty well in terms of relationships with the major powers. But India's bigger problem is in the neighborhood. You guys run any work on what if is happening in the neighborhood? What should India be doing in terms of really changing this? You really look at the former South countries, out of the 7 neighbors we have, 6 of them, our relationships have been dicey, barring Bhutan. We have on now and off now relationships with all our neighbors. What does the policy research say on should happen in the neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
This is working right now. Or it was working.
So it's as in historically the Republican government in the US works better for us when it comes to say Bangladesh or Pakistan. I expect the same. I expect the same this time around, right? But it's definitely a challenge, right? Like this Russia-Ukraine thing does have some lessons for China, Taiwan, and right, like alongside. I think one of the real threats is also China, alongside. So as in we will need to keep navigating and thinking thinking about these things, right? There's no answer as such with regards to, but I think the current US government will work better for us than the last one.
So I'm getting the answer that India's relationship with the neighborhood are determined in Washington, not in the neighborhood. But that's what I take from your answer.
Sadly.
Just a quick.
If like, as in, like simple internet searches would tell us that a lot of the money, say Bangladesh, right? What's happening there? It's a classic playbook. We have seen that in other places as well. Right? So I don't want to generalize or simplify, but a lot of these resources probably come from elsewhere.
Just quick follow-up. Do you think, in your assessment, China will make a move on Taiwan in the next 2 or 3 years?
I don't know.
Somebody had a question. Yeah, Suchita.
So I heard that Jinping had invited India to join him and fight against US. So what do you all think? What are the pros and cons?
I don't know what I'm saying. So these things are dynamic, right? And then it's
No one can.
Yeah, one should not take at least the media too seriously. Yeah. So.
At least the media projects, or even the media projects to your questions are that China will definitely make a pass at Taiwan, because the China's DeepSeek model that was also released, the AI model. So if you type in that DeepSeek model, where is Taiwan, it says Taiwan is a part of China already.
Which is true, but
Yeah. No.
the Americans have accepted it. It's a one China policy. India has accepted it.
That's like saying all of the POK is part
All
of
of
India.
the POK, or even the.
India is not about to make a move.
Yeah.
The question was about, is China likely to make a move?
Yeah.
I have a question from me. So as Sahil said that even though we are mostly talking about the turmoil which is happening right now from the situation, in the long run this is beneficial to the public sector for India if we so what's your view on the same on the private side? And I think my question is more specific to Rekha, because I come from a fintech background. So how do you think it impacts the fintech in India, let's say from services or product point of view?
So you saying the Trump administration in particular, or
The tariffs, and essentially US is becoming more conservative with having its own money itself, right? Losing off to other countries.
So I think a large part of Trump's agenda is not necessarily technology at this time. It's more like the manufacturing setups. So I think from a fintech point of view, I think with everything advancing further and further, I think India could do. I think what will stop is all of these travels. I think talent is going to get localized. Is I think what the future of talent is heading to. And we're not necessarily going to go cross-border. I think even if we do cross-border, we will do it sitting where we are. We don't necessarily need to move to another country or immerse in that country to kind of get that experience or exposure or run on that project. So from a talent in particular point of view, I think
Yeah, it's working now.
yeah. So I think that's the only shift that I see.
Yes.
That's the only shift that I see coming our way. But outside of that, it's not working.
No, the mics are not working.
Mics are bad. My apologies for that. Yeah.
On and off.
Yeah.
Okay, but I lost my chain of thought.
Yeah.
But
Try this. Yeah.
Just hand over both.
yeah, we have both. Yeah. No, so I was saying, I think the only change is going to be that the talent is going to get localized. But from a technology point of view, I think we will continue to do what we are doing. The manufacturing setups, and I know I've read a few researches that a lot of the companies, and there's this company called Rao, and they do talent assessment, and basically they're a talent intelligence platform. And a big part of their project that they're doing two big projects focusing on the US. One is AI and the impact of AI on the work that we do. And what does that mean in terms of shift of talent, shift of skill sets that we need. A regular Java developer today, what is this developer going to do in 5 years from now? AI is going to write the code for them. And then the next is for US, what are the areas where talent is available for a manufacturing setup? Where is managers available? And I think the struggle, I was listening to one podcast, I think that the struggle that US, from a manufacturing setup that they're having, is they're not able to find senior experienced managers to run your shop floor. So, and that's the struggle that they're having, and we honestly don't know how it's going to shape up in the next. I think I'm loud enough. I think so the next few years, how it's going to shape up is something that we're going to wait and watch. But one thing is for sure, that the way we work today, next five years down the line, is going to be a whole different ballgame of jobs and the roles that we have. And a lot of the company, a lot of the work that I do in talent management is precisely that, is to looking at what we do today, what are the skill set people have today, and what do we need 5 years down the line.
So do you think India having, let's say, the bulk of the people working on, as you said, back office tasks, etc., would India end up having a upskilling issue because of that?
Yes.
AI is coming in and people are not upskilling as well.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the finance operation, I'm just taking finance as an example. Your entire finance is an operation, your accounting, your posting, your receivables, your payables, your genetic AI is ready to replace it in the next year. And there are products available. Roles in HR, hiring, onboarding, offboarding, AI is going to take care of it. So that the bulk of the population, I think people, and I keep saying that in every conversation I have, that you need to think of how are you going to do your job with 5% of your time, but then you need to pick up something else to do it, especially the operational bits. And I think the big hit coming our way is operational. So, and I don't know if you'll have tracked this, like the BPO industry is dead. You have your bots answering calls. I don't know how many of this are working, but you have already bots making calls to candidates as first preliminary conversations. I've seen demos of products where an AI is doing an interview, and then is giving the feedback to the manager. So that level of technology is already there. It's not in the making; it's there. So the roles of HR are definitely changing. The roles of finance are changing. I'm sure in technology, I met with, we had our QA head in Pune yesterday. He said he's implementing AI for testing. So manual testing is going to get automated. So it's, in 5 years, we're going to see a whole different plethora of roles. And the way we work is going to be different. Everybody needs to be up for that challenge, because what you do today is not going to get you through.
No, I know. Not just
two more.
operations,
Okay,
right?
many more
Even
questions. Okay,
technology roles are going
we'll
to
go
be
one by
different.
one. Yeah.
Because there are software, AI-driven softwares who write the code on your behalf. You just have to enter the right.
This is working for now. Yeah.
Okay. So we primarily heard about politics and tariff and technology. So anything else that West could learn from India? Because these are the very common topics and you are in that field. But I wanted to hear more than that.
Sahil, you want to answer that?
No. Because science is there, then value system, culture is there. There are many.
Cultural diversity for sure. The family support ecosystem that each one of us enjoy. I think that is definitely what the West can learn. And even the contribution to science and biotechnology and gene cell therapy and all of that.
Lowest divorce rate.
I think one thing that West can definitely learn from us is how to manage scale. I think the scale and the volume of anything that we do, that we have, versus they manage is not good. Just our population is the baseline example, but everything else is not good. I think the economy, the scale, managing scale is something they're not necessarily good.
Anil, yeah, I'll come to you.
For a change, let's not talk about geopolitics. But, and this is could be a personal opinion. I haven't traveled west beyond Gulf, but is India and Indians too obsessed with West? I mean, I feel it's an unhealthy obsession. Of course, there's business and money on the West. But I think it can be only matched by Pakistan being obsessed with India. But again, this is my opinion, my point of view. And in general, somehow I feel Indians love to go to the West and then they say, Hamara culture West hai. And then they'll act like Indians and not want to learn anything from whichever country they call their second home. So just your piece of opinion, we are running short of time, working as brief as possible.
The Indians are obsessed with West. Say, back in the days, even I put my example, when I started my journey in IT, even I wanted to go to the US or UK or Europe just to taste what the life is standard of living is, or how do people go there and live their life, and maybe access to technology or access to various different aspects, or even the open-mindedness, right, that the West have in terms of not having having preconceived notions about someone or something, right? So that is, when I went there, I definitely had an obsession. But after a few months, even I realized that country back home, India is the best. The kind of support system, the value system, the ecosystem that we have, the cultural diversity, the spirituality of whatnot, and we all talk about. We, in fact, don't consider the value of it until we go to the West, right? And then once we are there, we realize the importance in the value system here. That's definitely there, right?
Indians are more Indians in the West than they are in India.
Exactly, that's true.
For sure.
Yeah.
Three parts to one same question. Primarily, was this move by Trump a defensive, offensive kind of thing? Second, has he cornered traffic? And third, after tariffs, what other things can he do? Because he's in a hurry.
So, as if you look at it as compared to the last term, Trump seems way better prepared, which is maybe last time the rhetoric was more this time he's acting. Probably he has a better team. He's so so he knows what he can do, what he can't do. So I think he always probably said it and would have done this. I think it's. I fundamentally think it caters to his audience, right? So he personally doesn't care about India or whatever. He would want to focus, as any politician would, on his voter base. So whether it's offensive or defensive, it's at least for them it's offensive. He wants to do this. He wants to give them the money that he gains back. About your second question about China, as in we didn't so far speak about that. There are multiple issues in China that predate what's happening there. Like, they relatively have an aging society. By 80, their population would shrink. It's already it's plateaued or it's slowly started shrinking, but we would see a real shrinkage of their population into this century. If you were to track their banking sector, they probably built a lot of houses that no one needed. So their financial system was in pain and has been in pain for the last years. Right? They have their own political uncertainty about what happens once the current head of China abdicates or retires or whatever. So whether China honors China, again, it's also a domestic question for China. It's not only what the US does that determines what happens in China. But I really think all of these would be used as opportunities by politicians to revive themselves. And I think that's exactly what Xi Jinping seems to be. So I think it's like they will again print money, they will revamp their economy, all of that, right? So it's probably in the short term again good for China. Right? So I forgot your third question.
Tapan, one second. I'll come back to the last question. Yeah, one last question there and then, yeah, Kaushal, I think you had raised your hand first. One second.
There seems to be a lot of discussion about this quote-unquote deep state, and very few people have visibility into it. There's a lot of online thing, and the outside influence they seem to have on geopolitics and the global order and so on. I don't know how much of it true. Can you shed some light? I mean, is this so-called deep state that people talk about everywhere? Is that for real, and do they really have that outside influence in determining the world policy?
Yeah.
I'm taking you through my thought process, right? Sure. I probably don't know more than you. So, if you were to have a particular protest, right? Let's look at the farmer protests in
in Delhi. I know firsthand, right, that a lot of protesters were offered pizza, right, nice drinks. They could also get a foot massage in the different camps that they were staying outside Delhi, right? So now someone needs to fund this, right? So now I don't know who, like, I honestly don't know, right? But just logically, we organize the Pune Public Policy Festival. It's a very small event. But we have to work very hard to organize this one, or even this event, right? So now this farmer protest, right? Someone thought about this as an event, right? I do not believe that it was a purely organic instance. It could have started off as an organic instance, but then someone wrote that instance and made something out of it, right? Now, who this someone is, what the intent was, I have no clue, right? But if so, when we say deep state, I think probably we mean this, right? We mean that there are certain people or entities that would use occasions that are probably organically happening to push their agenda, right? And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. We as India probably do it as well. About this earlier question about linking this to that, I think in our head we need to understand that our GDP per capita is $3,000 or $2,500. The US is $90,000, right? So we, as in I moved back from Germany to India, so yes, I love our values, all of that. But this is a reality that we need to live with, right? So to fund a protest, right? As India or as a society, we might have lesser money than a lot of other countries, and that's undeniable.
Thanks. One last question.
Okay, so Sahil, I wanted to ask you, see, so I work for the development sector. So a lot of my clients are actually non-profits. But so I've been reading up a little bit on these tariffs and the whole USA issue, because it kind of directly, the US aid anyway directly impacts us. So basically, from what I have read or understood about this whole tariff thing is that it is actually has nothing to do with any country in this world. It is more internal to shock their own economies, put the markets and flood the money into the long-term treasuries. And that in the next 6 months, whatever Elon is doing with the cost cutting, etc., is when the real policy work will start. Okay, and that is the time for everybody to watch out, because that would shape America's policy. And in the current scenario, actually US is in no position to actually say get lost to any of the countries like Vietnam or whoever, because they don't have the manufacturing capability. We are not just talking about the infrastructure, but also the talent and the technology to fund many of the small businesses. So I don't know whether this is actually the correct thinking, so I wanted to ask your opinion on that. And my second question is that directly related to the development sector. Like many of our clients get funded by, like the Susan and Dell Foundation or the Gates Foundation, etc. But a lot of that money is now shifting because of whatever the closure of USAID. Because, I mean, whatever we may have heard about USAID and its it's whatever role in statecraft, etc., but they were also funding a lot of good causes, okay? And because India's actually economic growth, we are no longer in that, in the list of those poor countries as such. So a lot of money is actually shifting out of India from the development sector. So how does that impact us? Is it a short-term thing? Like, is it that wait and watch for 6 months and things will correct themselves? Or are we looking at a long-term, at least a year-long kind of, stretch point for all these, non-profits who are looking at the big bucks?
So for maybe the others, so USAID is part of the US government that gives money to other countries for development, right? The leading three, so this is a bilateral agency, typically one. The three leading by budget, the largest ones are USAID and DFID, the UK one, and GIZ, which is the German one. So I don't think they will probably reinstate some part of USA. But I think this thinking is fundamental, right? I don't think it's USAID or like I don't know if you're aware, GIZ has been slowing down as well for the last years. So this logic of looking inward for a country is not as new, right? It's not as new as Trump, right? Trump is also responding to something, right? So it's not a unique thought that came to him suddenly and he's now saying let's do this. So I think it's a fundamental shift, right? And if you look at domestic philanthropy in India, it has been steadily increasing, right? So I think we need to look at a different model where a lot of non-profits, etc., are also funded by Indian money, and it's not necessarily external money that's funding this. So I don't think it will reverse to where it was, but it would be in between, right? But they will definitely cut down, and it's like PFID, like other like weirdly a Labour government in the UK is using like development money in defense, right, which would be unbelievable a few months back. But they are doing this, and I think in a way this whole Pax America, where what Trump says that the US has been funding peace in Europe, is fairly true, right? So the Europe needs to pay for its own defense, right? And where like Germany just announced $1 trillion fund, a $500 billion fund for Germany infrastructure, etc., and a $500 billion defense fund. So where will this money come from? Right? It would come from such budgets. I think it's going to slow down.
One last question, Kaushal, because you've raised your hand long time back. Yeah.
Is the American dream changing now, like from H1 to citizenship, the new generation? Can it be a shorter window now?
This is not working.
It's definitely changing.
It
Because
has
nowadays,
changed.
yeah,
Last
nowadays,
10
I
years.
think gone are the days. I think early 80s, 90s, early 2000s, 2010s as well, that dream was still there. I think a lot of the American folks who are on H1B, even on green card, they are now shifting base back to India because there are a lot of layoffs also that are happening. All the big FANG bank companies, they are also laying off massively. And after COVID, what has happened is the talent in India is extremely, scaled like anything, specifically on technologies like data and AI, right? And if you see, in fact, Megha was giving examples. Even I have seen demos where completely hiring, HR, operations, and even software coding, the apps that are written, the software apps, those are completely being written by AI, right? So there is absolutely no human intervention, manual intervention at all. And so these are the kind of talent that are growing in India. And see, earlier there was a fascination, again going back to Anirudh's question, there was a fascination for the West because we were trying to earn more. You know, the PPP, the parity was more there when we used to earn in US. But now if you see the salary ranges, the bucks that people are making, even at entry level or even with, 1 to 5 years of experience, forget even the senior most people in the folks. They are handsomely being rewarded, the kind of salaries, the kind of perks, the kind of profit share, the kind of joining bonuses, retention bonuses. I think they are very happy here, being closer to their families, being closer to the home country, in the home country, getting all the perks, benefits. And why will someone go to the West, right? And there is, and also not just that, in terms of quality access to healthcare, education as well. Because if I can talk about the UK, right, NHS. Even if you are saying that you're getting a heart attack or a stroke or a cardiac arrest, you will have to wait literally in the emergency, and by the time you're dead. So here at least getting prescriptions or getting access to emergency healthcare and quality healthcare is also much easier compared to the West. Right? So people are considering staying here, not applying to any of the foreign universities. In fact, I was just reading a report. Harvard didn't fill this year. Harvard Business School didn't fill all of their seats, so most of their seats went vacant. And the kind of expectancy ratio that they were expecting from India, they were not able to meet that this year. Right? So, and a lot of the experienced folks from US are also moving back to India. Because whatever, right? Even the education quality for their kids, or the elderly care, or the support ecosystem that we have, and the kind of salaries we are already making here in India. So why will someone go to the US?
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, Sahil, Supriya and Megha, thank you. One sec. So we have some takeaways for you. You're giving all three together? Kiske liye? So Megha, this is from all of us. This is from our gift sponsor called Fragrance Story, a Pune-based perfumery, and this is from the Hilton Hotel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Wow, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you once again. If you're still interested in understanding more in terms of what West can learn from India, the book is still here. I should thank Rohit and Express Bookstore for being there. Our next session is going to be on 23rd of May. It is going to be on a book written by Pat Cummins, the Australian, or I should say SRH captain currently. SRH, right? Yeah. Sunrisers Hyderabad captain. His book is called Tested. So he's written, I think, interviewed 12 different people on leadership and resilience. And therefore the topic of the discussion is going to be leadership and resilience. So hope to see all of you or many of you there. Have a good evening and a long weekend. Thank you.